Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Tuesday, June 16th, 2020 evening public comment period. I'm going to just read a little information so you know how to participate. We are in our first virtual evening public comment format. And so for the public watching, when you register to watch the meeting, you are registered in our system as attendees. You are just webinar participants who are simply viewers of the meeting and an audience member. Your microphone and your webcam are automatically muted as attendees. When we start public comment though, if you're interested in speaking, we will ask that you raise your virtual hand. You should see a hand icon on the device in which you are watching. Simply press the hand icon once to raise your hand, and the organizer will call your name, and you will be unmuted and given 3 minutes for public comment. When your 3 minutes is up, you'll go back into muted status, and the next name will be called. And then you can continue to watch the webinar as long as you choose. Thank you for all those watching. And we will start our public comment period, and I'll hand it over to our moderator.
Thank you, Chair Buck. At this time, I do see that there are 4 people in the attendee room for public comment. I will call your name and I will unmute your mic. Once you see the timer start, you can begin your public comment. Our first speaker will be Jim New. Just one moment, I'm gonna get the timer up here real quick. Got a little bit of a lag here. Mr. New, I'm gonna unmute you and then I will start the timer. 1 moment. You may begin your public comment.
Thank you. Just nod if you can hear me. Great, thank you. County Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I'd like to thank the 4 county commissioners that voted to approve the formulation of a county climate advisory committee and the bylaws for that committee at this morning's meeting. I do have a concern from the discussion of the board prior to voting. Discussion focused on keeping the advisory committee centered on its purpose and not becoming political, which most commissioners agreed to. However, a commissioner adamantly stated that this climate committee is political as well as the whole concept of a county climate action plan. He then went on to defend his beliefs of denying climate change, that this county climate action plan was political and the climate advisory committee was political. Given the bylaws of the climate advisory committees, which states that each county board of commissioners picks an advisory committee member, I question the responsibility and productivity of this commissioner's choice. It is clear from his counterproductive opinion this morning that his decision to provide a responsible and proactive member seeking a successful climate action plan is in jeopardy. It is analogous to a mission in providing a vaccine to counter the effects of the coronavirus, and one of your management team is saying this is a waste of time and it will never work. Do you want that guy to have any input into your project? I look forward to a productive, successful county climate action plan that will aid in the county's efforts to reduce our carbon footprint, provide jobs in renewable energy, address misguided forest management plan, and improve the environmental future of generations to come. I rely on the County Board of Commissioners to not let this goal become distracted by delusional scientific denialism and misguided personal opinions. I appreciate the ability to talk tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your public comment. I will now move to Laurie Treeger. Laurie, I will unmute you and I will start the timer and you may begin your public comment. 1 moment. You may begin your public comment.
Laurie, we can't hear you if you're speaking. I think you're on mute.
I will pause on Laurie Treeger right now, and I will go to Jim Steiner, and we can come back to Laurie Treeger if that's okay with everybody. Mr. Steiner, I'm not sure if you can hear me. Your phone looks like you have not entered a PIN, but I'm going to try to send you a PIN. I'm going to try, Mr. Steiner, I'm going to pause for a moment and see if you can talk. So before I reset the timer, I just want to make sure we have audio with you. And I'm not showing that you have your phone unmuted. Can you hear us? Okay, I'm going to switch back to Laurie Treeger one more time. Laurie, can you hear us? I show that you're self-muted right now. I do show one other person for public comment, and that is David IGL, David Eigel. But I don't see a phone for you or a hand raised, so I'm not sure if you wanted to speak. And now I see Laurie Treeger coming in on a different line. Mr. Steiner, I do see that your hand is raised and I'm unable to unmute you. You have to unmute your phone on your end so you can speak. Chair Buck, I'm at kind of the end of knowing what to do with public comment because I can't get through to the other people. I do see David Eigel, but no phone. And Mr. Steiner, I'm going to try Laurie Treeger one more time. Laurie, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
I can now. I'm going to go ahead and reset the timer. One moment. You may begin your public comment.
Thank you. Third time and third device is a charm. Appreciate your patience. I'm here this evening to thank you for last week's unanimous passage of the resolution in support of Black Lives Matter movement and Lane County's commitment to putting the work in to achieve racial equity. Now begins that real work, the heavy lifting of designing ways to make it tangible, to operationalize it, and bring this resolution to life. I think I want to say the most significant and useful part of that resolution will prove to be the final section, which states when policies fail, Lane County will wholeheartedly and enthusiastically start over and seek out new and more effective anti-racist policies until they work. I think this will prove most useful because when it comes to dismantling systems of oppression and rebuilding societal structures in a way that authentically and sincerely seeks justice as the goal, failure along the way is a given. After all, we humans are deeply fallible, and as a society, we are really brand new to this work, whereas racism and oppression have the upper hand with their centuries of practice at self-preservation. I listened in on your meeting this morning and heard several of you expressing willingness to explore renaming Lane County so as not to glorify a legacy of racism. I support this action, but urge you to please think more expansively about naming opportunities and not limit the conversation to the county name. Please consider the formation of an advisory board composed of majority women and Black, Indigenous, people of color, a board whose task would be to work with staff to first inventory all named county assets, infrastructure, monuments, and so on, which includes but doesn't have to be limited to parks, roads, bridges, and buildings. This committee would then establish a process and timeline for new naming opportunities, as well as recommendations for renaming those deemed injurious by the advisory board and the communities they represent. The process would also include creating recommendations for how to continually reevaluate named county assets on an ongoing basis as historical arcs move, as new leaders emerge, and as we learn more and come to understand things with fresh perspective over time. The goal is to properly and proportionally represent, honor, and amplify the contributions and sacrifices of women and Black, Indigenous, and people of color to our communities, as well as to acknowledge, repair, and make amends for past harms. In closing, in honor of Pride Month and because Black Lives Matter, I offer a short quote from the Black writer, activist, and queer man James Baldwin, who said, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. Thank you for taking time to hear my comment this evening and for facing the hard and messy truths before us.
Thank you for your public comment. I do still show Mr. Steiner with his hand raised, but I do show that he's still in a mute status. Mr. Steiner, I'm showing that you have not entered your PIN. If you enter 44314 on your phone keypad, again, that's 44314 with the pound sign, you should have audio controls, but I am showing you have not entered that yet. I do show Mr. Eigel, but he is not on. So at this time, if you want to move into remonstrance, we can kind of maybe keep working and I can see if I get the other two calls in.
That sounds good. We can have some remonstrance if for some reason they're able to get through, then maybe we can pause. Does that sound good for everybody? I was hoping we'd get more people out this evening, but this is our first evening virtual public comment. So let's go to any comments or remonstrance. Commissioner Sorensen.
Thank you. I hope we get an opportunity to hear anyone who has signed up and hasn't had a chance to speak. So maybe Ms. Jones can interrupt me or anyone else if we get other speakers on the line. I just wanted to thank Ms. Treeger for taking the time to come to the public comment this evening. And it is, you know, an imposition of time to figure out how to comply with all of our rules and the technology to make some insightful comments on the issue of naming things in Lane County. And I like this growing idea of a committee or a group that would kind of get school children and the public and amateur historians involved in whether or not these features around the county or the county name itself or other things can be changed, modified. I did look into this a number of years ago and learned that King County, Washington was named for a Rufus King, and that as time passed, they decided to change the name from King County to King County. So one of the things that I am hoping can happen here is that we can minimize the impact of some of our name change things. I think that because of the size of King County, just changing the names on the signs and the letterhead of that day. I'm sure I'd have to explain to my children and grandchildren what letterhead is, but there was expense associated with it. And I want to minimize that expense. I don't want the expense to be the reason we don't do these things. But I definitely think we should keep going. And I like the idea of broadening it and also broadening who would be on the committee. Thanks a lot.
Sounds like Diana might see one more person who wants to talk.
Thank you, Chair Buck. Ryan Moore, I see you have joined, and I'm going to unmute you, and you may begin your public testimony when the timer starts. You may begin your testimony. Mr. Moore, can you hear us? Well, it looks like we're having the same problem, but I do see Mr. Eigel now has his phone connected, so I'm going to switch to him real quick. Hold on. Mr. Eigel, can you hear us? Hello?
I hear whistling.
We hear whistling. I'm going to try Ryan Moore I'm going to try Ryan Moore one more time. Mr. Moore, I have unmuted your mic, your phone. Okay, I think that at that point I can't get through to anyone else. Sorry.
Okay, technological issues today.
To you, Chair Buck.
Okay, any other remonstrance or comments for our two speakers? Commissioner Burney and then Commissioner Farr.
I beg Commissioner Farr to go before me this time. Yes or no, sir?
You're so kind. Thank you, Joe. Chair Buck, I know I'll say something that you are probably going to say is that the folks who are not able to testify audio can certainly submit their testimony via written testimony. And I hope they do. Mr. New was able to do it, so clearly we have some capacity to do it. But I don't know. Perhaps we can have Mr. New come back on and say how he did it.
Commissioner Burney.
Several comments. One is to Jim New. I don't know if you heard, but I advanced an idea, and I want you all to be aware of it, that relates to having us look at pursuing grant or external funding opportunities to assess very quickly the capacity of parking lots and public structures, public parking lots, public structures for solar. Solar now should always be combined with battery storage. And then look at public dollars, not to pay for that, but to offset that enough so that we can unleash private investment and create a lot of jobs here. That's one little piece of climate action, but it's a job creating significant piece. And I just don't know the degree to which you heard our morning meeting, but I wanted to share that with you. And Laurie Treeger, forgive me, but one of the things that you said, I agree with your intent and the passion that you convey. And by the way, I had the same problem you had. I tried to listen into the conversation with you and Jolie Boa last night. I couldn't get on the darn Facebook thing, and it was so frustrating. So I'm sorry that everyone is experiencing that. But when we talk about the real work begins now, and forgive me, but this is just and that, you know, the work has been going on, in my opinion, for hundreds of years. And people have lived their lives and lost their lives doing that work. And in no way do I want, at least, to be presumptuous and suggest that because this board approved a very important resolution to approve, that our work begins now. I shared the story of one person last time someone said that, and I want to share the story of another. I just happen to know him, but it exemplifies what I'm trying to say. There was a man named Prexy Nesbitt, came from, he's still alive, he's 15 years older than me. He came from the south side of Chicago, a black man. He worked in a mission and was the head organizer for both the campaign in the 70s to get colleges and universities across this country to disinvest in apartheid South Africa. And he then worked for the World Council of Churches in Geneva. He also, during the apartheid phase, went to South Africa periodically and organized the quote unquote coloreds at that time in transforming that country. I had the honor of working with him and knowing him during that period of time. So I agree with your statement 1,000%, but I just want to acknowledge that we are not beginning work, but we definitely have a historical opportunity to hopefully be a part of having that work bear significant results at this point in time. I'm hoping that the other presenters can talk. I'm disappointed that we only have 5 people for our public comment, and 4 of them have already approached this board publicly. And I can't wait until, not for my time, but I can't wait until we have hundreds of people participating and these truly become democratic opportunities for discussion and debate. Thank you, Chair.
We'll try one last time to see if any of the other speakers have found a way to get audio.
Mr. Steiner, I do show that it looks like you've entered your PIN, so I'm going to try one more time to unmute you, and then I will reset the timer and you may begin your public testimony. One moment. Mr. Steiner, you are unmuted. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we
Holy
can.
smoke. I'm going to play the lottery today now.
Let me reset the timer. You may begin your public testimony.
Commissioners, first, thanks. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you virtually. Thank goodness, and I appreciate Diana for helping us get back on. First, I want, as you saw in my email this morning, I was not looking for a board decision from you all, but rather checking in to see individually what level of support this union had from its elected commissioners. I also want to congratulate you, before I forget, on receiving the reimbursement for the initial COVID-19 expenses. I understand it's around $5.3 million. So that's great for our county. Look, the union believes that the board support is very important to our members, and therefore we seek to find out who is and who is not supportive of fair and equitable COLAs across the board for Lane County employees. It seems only natural when being told, as we have been many times, that the board doesn't support the same COLAs for AFSCME, that we ask who, which commissioners, and that's really what the intent was. It's important to know is, and maybe we can provide information or perspectives to those commissioners who may not agree, and maybe the information or education we provide might change an opinion. That's how things normally have been done, and that's what we're trying to accomplish. If you recall, my email pointed out what 1% represents in terms of wages and percentage of wages across the entire county. I specifically gave you those general numbers to highlight the cost in comparison to overall labor costs within the entire county. I also pointed out that 1% of wages equals about 2.5 furlough days. We are also concerned about what message you might be receiving. What we know is that if you only hear one side of any issue, you will more than likely make a one-sided decision. There are many ways to handle a 1% reduction while still maintaining COLAs across the board. Interestingly enough, we are not talking about a 1% reduction in salary across the county. Now, cost of living adjustments are just that and are necessary to keep up with the rising costs of everyday life. They are also tied to our market rate comparators, which we did in the last contract. This union and you, I'm sure, know that 80% of those still in this bargaining unit are not paid at the comparator rate at the conclusion of the last bargaining. Remember that the last contract ended in a strike over pay equity, insurance, fairness, and respect issues. Those pay issues have not been fully resolved. Whether you agree or not, being treated differently, receiving less than everyone else is a clear message to our members that you're not valued. And no matter how many times I tell them or you tell them, it won't change how they feel or that fact. But you may already know this. So I again ask, so that we can pick the right course, advise our folks properly, will you, which of you individually support all units getting the same COLA? And if you don't support that, do you believe that folks that don't receive this should be caught up before others receive any additional compensation? Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Chair Buck, I would like to try Ryan Moore one last time. He still has his hand up, so let me try him one last time. Mr. Moore, you've been unmuted. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Oh, geez. I can hear you many times.
It sounds like you have two devices running at the same time, Mr. Moore.
How's this?
Much better.
All right.
Let me get to the timer and start it.
All right. So the
You may begin
vagaries
your public
of
comment.
public comment in the current era, right? Thanks for all the patience. I'm glad I was able to connect. My name is Ryan Moore. I live in Chair Buck's district. Thanks for the chance to testify today. I'm wearing two hats right now, so I'll start with the first. As a co-founder of the Springfield Eugene Tenant Association, I know you've heard from us a lot in the past several weeks, and there's a reason for that. Well, several reasons. One being, comes as no surprise, I'm sure, that renters tend to be members of populations that are historically disadvantaged and disenfranchised and not empowered to show up at meetings like this in many cases. And so I want to urge you all, if you are hearing from renters, I hope in your minds you're magnifying that several times over for all the voices that are not chiming in alongside the ones you are hearing. Along with that, as I'm sure you're also aware, it is legal to evict tenants for non-payment of rent beginning roughly 2 weeks from today. So there is some urgency to this matter and these discussions, right? So I know you're aware of it. I just want to keep it top of mind. My second hat, as a regular old garden variety citizen, I'm a renter myself. My partner and I, throughout this whole crisis, were only able to maintain our housing because we lucked out and found a unit managed by a single private landlord, not a big company. And because of that, they were more willing and open to negotiating our rent. They cut it in half for the duration of this crisis. And because of that, we were able to stay in the housing. We were dealing with job loss because of COVID-19. Our income was substantially reduced. We would not have been able to pay rent during this time. And we would have been likely facing eviction in about 2 weeks if we had not had such a great landlord. So I say that to underscore that even, I like to think that I kind of have my life together. Even people in my situation are facing this crisis head on. And I can't imagine for someone less privileged, marginalized, who faces more barriers in life, how difficult it must be for them. So I know you're already feeling the urgency, but just to add a bit more to it, there's that. And thanks for hearing me tonight. And I'm sure you'll hear from us more in the next couple of weeks. Thanks again. Bye.
Thank you for your public comment. Chair Buck, at this time, believe it or not, we have gotten through public comment. We have everyone who has signed up to speak has been able to speak. So I will turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Buck, and thank you, Mr. Moore, for your testimony regarding renters. You speak for a great many people in Lane County and beyond our borders who are worried about what the future holds regarding the rent and the rent that they're already behind on. Each of the county commissioners has supported that, the discussion surrounding supporting renters. We do have a very small program that is operated through our Human Services Commission that helps prevent people from becoming homeless. But the good news that I heard today, and it's not fully good news yet, is that I got a message this morning from the National Low Income Housing Coalition that talks about the Emergency Rent Assistance and Rental Market Stabilization Act, which has been introduced by 2 representatives and 1 senator in the federal government. And the name of the act is the Emergency Rental Assistance Ensuring Housing Stability During the COVID-19 Pandemic. I'm not going to go into a great deal of detail about it. It was distributed this morning. I believe most commissioners have perhaps had a chance to see this, but the bill will call for $100 billion in emergency rental assistance directly related to COVID-19. Yet to see exactly how it materializes. And there is work ahead before this goes through, but there are not a great many dollars available locally, but the federal government and the state are really paying attention. I'm hoping and expecting they will step up to the plate, Mr. Moore, to help with the people that you advocate so strongly for. Thank you for being here tonight. Once again, you are talking for a lot of people. Your voice is representing a lot of people tonight.
Any other comments or remonstrance? Commissioner Bozovich.
Thank you. First, I'll just direct people to actually listen to what I said this morning regarding the climate action plan, rather than going on what Mr. New paraphrased my comments were. I would like to say that in the Attorney General's recommendations around avoiding serial meetings, even checking in individually in serial can violate the public meetings law. And I recommend that we hear from counsel before anybody responds to Mr. Steiner's request, and just take care around that issue. I'll also remind the board that both sides have agreed to ground rules on how negotiations are take place. And this seems like it's outside of the ground rules that were agreed to. Finally, I just would like to maybe assure Mr. Moore a little bit that not only do we have federal action taking place, but the governor's called a special session for June 24th, which is prior to the expiration of the moratoriums, to address two specific issues: police accountability and the COVID emergency issues. There are a couple little other minor things, but there's a list of 25 specific issues. On that list is number 7 is the commercial eviction moratorium executive order, and number 8 is the residential eviction executive order, moratorium executive order. So I'm expecting that special session is going to result in an extension of those eviction moratoriums prior to their expiration. So I appreciate the stress that this shutdown of the economy has put on renters, and hopefully having that action at the state level is probably the most appropriate place to have it happen, because of the issues of local governments and takings and what's involved there. I do know that there's some serious concern about Multnomah County's actions and the legal ramifications if their county actions extend beyond the state's actions on July 1st. But it looks to me, though, like the state will be taking action and we won't have to be concerned with that local liability. So just those couple things. And I really want to apologize to David, because I was curious what his testimony was going to be, because he sent an email to all the board members about Mr. Dunn and in reference to D.D. Hall denaming, and I didn't quite make the connection, and I wanted to hear what he was going to have to say so I could make the connection between his email and some of the other issues that were going on today in today's world. So I apologize for the technological issues that we have in this format. It's not the same as being able to have people just walk in person and give testimony.
Any other comments or remonstrance? Commissioner Sorensen.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to respond to Mr. Moore's comment about the renter situation. Well, first of all, I appreciate your civic involvement and work with the Springfield Eugene Tenants Association. That is a voice that we have not heard much from over the years, the voice of renters. So I'm really glad that you've taken the step to help that organization and participate with it. The timing couldn't be better, as it's sad to say, because we're now going into this horrific recession, if not depression, and we need the advocacy for renters now more than ever. So thank you for that. There does seem to be some movement at the state level, both with the legislature being called into session, as well as the growing awareness that the courts and executive branch of the state government are realizing that this moratorium is coming to an end. And the moratorium was never, you'll never have to pay your rent. It was just a delay in that, and I'm sure a lot of renters won't be able to pay their rent. So, and also thanks for giving us some upside to this, namely that landlords are well aware of this situation and they're doing what they can, many of them. And oftentimes government policy is not aimed at the broad spectrum of the public. It's aimed at the people that are maybe trying to take advantage of other people, and they are the outliers. They're not the mainstream. So anyway, thanks so much for commenting, and I think I'll keep it at that for now. Thank you.
Commissioner Burney.
I apologize. If anyone noticed me roll my eyes, it was because right at the moment the chair was going to call me, my son called me and the phone was loud. I was like, ah. First of all, Ryan, it's delightful to hear your voice. I wish I could see you. And thank you very much for the many hats you wear. I want to say that one of the elements that is weaving through this issue is the commoditization of housing. And the commoditization, I see Commissioner Bozovich's dog, the commoditization of housing and the increased ownership of units by real estate investment trusts, and the ability to trade even, I understand, futures markets on real estate prices is undergirding so many of the issues that we are grappling with, you know, at the local level where our resources are scarce. And I hope people don't mind if I say that every commissioner has really invested a lot of support to work with CETA and try and figure out how we can mitigate as best as possible. I did speak with, is Mr. Dingle on the line or no? Okay.
I am, Commissioner.
Oh, well, you know, Commissioner Bozovich mentioned that he didn't know if it was okay to respond to Mr. Steiner. I am planning to, but would you like to clarify? Because I know you and I have talked and you said that it's okay to do that here, but is that correct?
Yes. I think what Commissioner Bozovich is saying is that he, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, Commissioner, correct me if I'm wrong. There's two issues at play here. One is the rules surrounding collective bargaining. And Commissioner Bozovich has correctly pointed out, and I know that we have, I believe Ms. Onrud and Ms. Nagels are on the call, and that there are certain ground rules that have been agreed to by the parties about how they're going to negotiate at the table. That presents one issue, a potential ULP, but what I addressed with the board was the other issue that Commissioner Bozovich mentioned, which is the serial meeting issue. The serial meeting issue is resolved here because you've heard a comment or a public comment in a duly noticed public meeting, and now you, as an individual commissioner, have the right to make a response or not make a response. So that issue is off the table. Does that clarify it for you?
Yes, sir. And it means that I don't get in trouble by responding directly, speaking only for myself.
That's correct.
Speaking only for myself, I think I have a different take in that part of my past experience is owning a business that was unionized and we were not in good shape financially. And I had to forego really the kind of Christmas I wanted to give my then small children in order to make payroll so that our employees, in fact, could have the holidays they were planning. So my belief, and I'm going to do it by analogy and I'm going to answer directly, but my belief very strongly is that what I hear from Mr. Steiner is I hear an understanding that we don't know what the future holds. And in fact, his calling out 2.5 furlough days would take care of a 1% COLA increase, suggests a willingness to be a partner in addressing the financial realities as they occur, which none of us know what they're going to look like. There's also another problem or issue in that before COVID-19, which changed everything, there were negotiations that did provide 2% COLAs, and the AFSCME has offered to something different than that. So here's my analogy. If I was the only captain on the ship and we were entering troubled waters, if we sank, I would want to go down with my crew. If the troubled waters were hitting me from every direction, I would want the crew to have my back, and I would want them to know I had their back. We don't know how this is going to work out. So speaking only for myself, I support my understanding of the proposal that was laid before us.
Any other
I caught about
comments?
every third word of that.
My internet is a little slow as well, but I heard most of it, but some of us might not have been able to.
I could try saying it like one word. I don't know. Tell me what else to do. I tried to make my point and respond directly to Mr. Steiner's question.
Any other comments or remonstrance? Not seeing one. I guess I'll make a few comments here to wrap this up. We only had 4 people able to come on tonight, so we'll see if we can do this next month, and people might hear about it more and be able to come on if at all possible. I am very happy that we were able to complete the Climate Advisory Committee makeup and bylaws and applications procedures for the Climate Action Plan this morning. So I look forward to seeing people's applications here soon. I do completely understand Ms. Treeger's ask of talking about more than just the name of the county. There are lots of things that have been named all over the place that maybe we would reconsider now. And they may be symbolic in nature, but deeply affect people in our county. So I'm interested in hearing more about that. On Brian's comments regarding eviction moratorium and rental issues, I was going to say the same thing that Commissioner Bozovich said. You know, the short session, I think, it's going to result in some of the things that were even on the CETA letter to the board for asks for renters. So, and we have a work session about those items when we return from a 2-week break here, and we're back on July 7th. I'm not entirely sure if it's on the July 7th agenda, but we'll be looking at that soon and have a good work session. By then, we'll probably know what has happened in the short session at the state as well. On Mr. Steiner's comment regarding AFSCME, you know, we do meet in executive session. We're not allowed to say anything about what we said in executive sessions, which I don't think is what you're asking for. But you know, when we're in negotiations, it's really hard to communicate because there are ground rules in play. I just want to say, generally, I support Lane County workers, and I hope workers know that. With that, are there any other final comments? Commissioner Farr?
Thank you, Chair Buck. I wasn't going to go much into the detail on this, but you know, we did receive initially a little less than $1 million to distribute for renter relief. We took applications for that. The applications booked the money very, very quickly. We have received someplace close to another $5 million that will be distributed very quickly. And I've asked how that will be distributed. We have 2,159 pre-applications for relief, and the pre-applications that have already been received, my understanding, will be the ones that are first in line to receive the money from the $5 million. I'm not certain exactly what the timing is on that. We should know that likely by the end of this week. Lane County Human Services is working very quickly to get the money to the people who need it as quickly as possible. But the state has, through its processes, given us the initial slightly less than 1 million and then an additional 5 million. We will wait to see what the $100 billion of federal relief looks like when we get more information.
Commissioner Bozovich.
If it's all right, I want to jump back to some of our other business from this afternoon. I found out the actual dates of that negotiation around the attorney's fees in the Lynn County court case are the exact 4 days. Both Commissioner Burney and I will not be available. That's the Doodle polls over those 4 days. So I would like to ask that the board designate, seeing that Chair Buck is wearing lots of hats during the COVID emergency. I was thinking of Commissioner Farr, who was at least around when we entered into the Lynn County suit and has some history there, because they're asking for an in-person meeting. And I know Commissioner Sorensen is limited to his ability to do some in-person work because of his issues around asthma and a few other things. So that's if Commissioner Farr is willing to do an in-person meeting.
Can you
Mr.
say the
Doodle?
dates again, Commissioner Bozovich?
Yeah,
The Doodle poll was for the 23rd through the 7th, I think, was the times and dates they had in the Doodle poll. I can look it up real quick.
Mr. Bozovich, I can send Commissioner Farr those dates, but I believe you're right.
Yeah.
Mr. Dingle, I just want to double check, since this is not on our agenda for the evening, is it okay to do this before the day is out in this setting?
It's fine, Commissioner.
Okay, great. Commissioner Burney.
I just want to share that even though I'm going to be gone, I told Commissioner Bozovich I'd be happy to be on the phone though and interrupt. And that's when I learned that it had to be in person. So Commissioner Farr, I guess it's my honor to do what you did earlier in the day and nominate you to take Commissioner Bozovich's place.
Tag.
I will look for the Doodle poll. Did you say the 26th through the 28th of June, which is over a weekend?
No, 23rd through the 26th. 23rd, 24th, 26th.
Commissioner Farr,
I'm
I
good for
will
that.
send you the Commissioner Farr. I'll send you the email with the Doodle poll itself.
Perfect. Those should be good dates for me, though.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the judge in the case is asking for in person, not virtual. So I understand that Commissioner Sorensen has been limiting his exposure for good reason. So that's why I kind of felt like Commissioner Farr would be the natural fallback.
Okay, problem solved.
Thank you.
Any other?
That's easy
final
for you to
thoughts?
say.
I do have a lot going on right now, so I appreciate Commissioner Farr being okay with that. Any other final thoughts for this evening? Okay, well, with that, thank you for everybody who called in. We appreciate your time, and we will adjourn the Board of County Commissioners meetings for June 16th, 2020. Thank you.